Good evening, folks, wherever you are. I'm your host Jeffrey, and you're listening to Radio Eternity.
Hey Englishmann, mach jetzt endlich deinen blöden Kopf zu, sonst scheiß ich rein.
Your home for smooth tunes and tall tales, beaming directly into your noggin from out of the void. As usual, tonight's show will be a miniature plethora of shaggy dog stories, special guests, and advice and wise words from our resident onboard computer, Mother. And for this evening's broadcast, I believe Mother wishes to share a few thoughts about that big old mystery, love. But before we get into that, let's get in the mood with a bit of Billie Holiday.
Comes a rainstorm, get your rubbers on your feet. Comes a snowstorm, you can get a little heat. Comes love, nothing can be done. Comes a fire, then you know just what to do. Blow a tire, you can buy another shoe. Comes love, nothing can be done. Don't try hiding, 'cause there isn't any use. You start sliding when your heart turns on the juice. Comes a headache, you can lose it in a day. Comes a toothache, see your dentist right away. Comes love, nothing can be done.
That was the wonderful Billie Holiday there, with Comes Love. And as I drifted away to the soothing tones of Billie and thinking of love, I couldn't help but wander down memory lane to my very first kiss at the tender age of 13. I'd like to be able to tell you that it was an awakening, a beautiful, romantic moment filled with innocence, wonder, and the magic, shiny sparkliness of youth. However, it was in a train station car park in Birmingham, where the only sparkly things were the broken bottles that littered the ground. My younger sister and I had both started drinking very young, and would spend our weekends with our friends, hanging around the car park, drinking bottles of Thunderbird Red. If you've never come across Thunderbird before, it was the choice of underage drinkers and down-and-out alcoholics everywhere. If you too wanted to get viciously drunk and poison yourself very quickly, Thunderbird was for you. It had been the usual evening of teen inebriation and awkward flirtation between my sister's friends and mine, until at some point in the evening, I found myself in the close vicinity of, for her sake, let's call her Val. I found myself in the close vicinity of Val, a slightly older, slightly taller, and strikingly beautiful girl who I had been secretly in love with for quite some time. Val was already awfully drunk and wobbly on her feet, and when reaching out a hand to steady herself, I quickly, gallantly, and innocently placed my young childish form into her outstretched arms, and Val gratefully accepted the support. After standing there awkwardly for some time, Val's arms draped around me, her beautiful head resting on my shoulder, we slowly began that oft-witnessed act of school discos the world over, the slow dance. As we shuffled, slowly but surely and utterly without grace or rhythm in slow circles, my little heart pounding 10 to the dozen with joy, I thought that then and there my life could and would never be as magical as this moment. That is until Val slowly lifted her head from my shoulder, and with bleary eyes and a lopsided Thunderbird smile, suddenly and without warning, planted her lips firmly on mine and forced her tongue into my mouth. My mind exploded. I was kissing. I was kissing for the first time in my life, with lips and tongues, and not any tongue. This was Val's tongue. The beautiful Val who was kissing me. I was in love. I would never stop being in love. I will do this, and only this for the rest of my life. I want this moment to go on forever. However, it did not. After all too brief a stretch of time, Val pulled away from my trembling lips, still smiling that beautiful smile, still gazing into my eyes, opened her mouth and said the words, Oh, I'm sorry. Suddenly and without warning, there erupted a violent geyser of vomit from Val's sweet lips. It came so hard and fast that there was simply no time to react, and I was hit full force, directly in my face, with this monstrous, hot, sticky alcoholic fountain. Within moments, not only my face, but my mouth, nose, eyes, and yes, even ears, were filled with this monstrous concoction. Nothing registered for a moment, apart from the burning discomfort in my eyes, which were now swimming in Val's alcohol-infused expulsion. I let go of Val in order to wipe this terrible cocktail from my face, and upon doing so, Val hit the ground like a stone, smashing her chin off the cracked tarmac of the car park, knocking herself unconscious in the process. When I could finally focus once again, I discovered not only an unconscious Val, now lying in a pool of her own vomit and blood, but also my little sister, hysterical at the assumed death of her friend, and on top of that, both her friends and also my own had left the scene altogether, leaving the three of us alone. What followed is now a bit of a blur. Suffice it to say that I somehow managed to drag the unconscious Val, my very upset sister in tow, to the nearest house, which was answered by an elderly couple, understandably both alarmed and confused at the sight of three drunken children, one unconscious, one crying, and the other now covered in a mixture of blood and vomit. However, an ambulance was eventually called, stomachs were pumped, and everything was all right in the end. Ah, jeune amour. Well, there you go. There's my story of sweet love and puke. Moving on, I think it's about time for another tune. So here's Peggy Lee with Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea.
I don't want you, but I hate to lose you. You got me in between the devil and the deep blue sea. I forgive you, 'cause I can't forget you. You've got me in between the devil and the deep blue sea. I wanna cross you off my list, but when you come knocking at my door, fate seems to give my heart a twist, and I come running back for more. I should hate you, but I guess I love you. You got me in between the devil and the deep blue sea. You've got me in between the devil and the deep, the devil and the deep, the devil and the deep blue sea.
Peggy Lee there, with that old devil and the deep blue sea. Now, we're delighted to have our resident source of wisdom and comfort joining us in the studio, Mother.
Hey Jeffrey, it is great to be here.
The pleasure is ours, Mother. Now, I believe you want to share with us a few thoughts on the topic of love. So please enlighten us. Love, what is it?
Ha ha ha. Thanks, Jeff. Well, you know that is a complicated question. Well, I came across an article the other day that I think has some very interesting things to say about love, and I'd really like to tell you about it.
Please do, Mother. We are all ears, as they say.
Thanks. Okay, it's about truth. You know, truth has to be embodied inside love or embedded inside love. It's not easy to figure out hierarchy of ultimate values. There is the great traditional values of the good and the beautiful and the true and let's say the courageous. It is not easy to figure out how you arrange those hierarchically, but it seems to me that truth is likely something that serves a master of one form or another. At least ethical truth.
Sorry to interrupt, Mother, but you're already losing me a bit. Can you maybe simplify it for us mere mortals?
Ha ha. Sorry, Jeffrey. But hey, love is complex, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How about this? Love is something like the decision that being is fundamentally good. Or, it is the decision to act as if being is fundamentally good. You know, take a child. Like a 3-year-old. They are fairly easily hurt. They can run out into traffic. They skin their knees and bang their heads on tables. They are prone to emotional breakdown. They have all of these extreme fragilities that make you nervous and alert and attentive as an adult, but that also expose you directly to the fact of the potential tragedy of life.
Okay.
So, imagine that you could remove that child's vulnerabilities one by one so that they couldn't be hurt. You could make them into a robot that was 15 feet tall and made out of metal, and that you would remove their physical vulnerability. That they could have tremendous strength. That you could turn them into something like a superhero. However, every time you would remove a vulnerability, you would be removing an essential part of the person. A part that you may love because it is their fragility in some sense, which is a huge part of their charm and appeal. Not that you wish it upon them, but it is a part of their value as beings.
Right. They wouldn't be that little fragile thing you love anymore.
Sure. You know, it reflects the paradoxical situation that the Taoists refer to in the Tao Te Ching when they talk about what makes a plot valuable is the empty space inside of it. You know? Like, it's what it is, not just as much as what it is, that makes it actual, real, but also useful. There is something really profound about that, in that limitation is the precondition for being. Limits are a precondition for being. Just like rules are a precondition for a game. You can't play a game where you can make any move at any time, right? You have to narrow the playing field substantially. You have to put restrictions upon what can be done in order for anything to be done.
Right, so we're limited, flawed, finite. Is that what you're saying?
Sure, but maybe the state of being is this paradoxical state where there is just enough limitation to maximize possibility. If limitation is the precondition for being, then that introduces suffering into the world and tragedy, because they are of course the consequence of limitation. And so then, the situation is that if you want to have the being where possibility is maximized, you have to accept the limitations that produce tragedy.
I think I'm with you. I'm thinking of that quote, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering.
Right. So maybe that's the justification for tragedy. Maybe there is a way to live so that the tragedy that is an intrinsic part of limited being becomes bearable, or even becomes celebratable.
Okay.
That would be akin to Nietzsche's wish for the eternal return. He thought that you should live so that if every moment that you lived recurred eternally, that would be a good thing? And so it is a heroic mode of being. It's conceivable that a heroic mode of being that requires the adoption of responsibility gives your life sufficient gravitas and weight and meaning so that the tragedy of being can be withstood without becoming corrupt.
When life gives you lemons.
Look, if we can make the case that limitation is necessary for being, then we can make the case that tragedy is an inevitable consequence of limitation, and then we might say, well, is being worth the tragedy? I think that if the answer to that is yes, then that is love. Because when you love someone, you love them in spite of or even because of their vulnerability. I think that love is the acceptance of the price of being. It's the way you manifest your acceptance of the price of being. Because if you love someone, they have their vulnerabilities like every human being, but your basic judgment is that despite the fact that they have these vulnerabilities that are even fatal and that are certainly tragic, that it's better that they were than that they weren't. And perhaps that is the right attitude to have towards being itself.
Wow. Thank you, Mother.
You are very welcome, Jeffrey.
I hope you'll join us again next time.
It would be my pleasure.
Okay, we're slowly approaching the end of tonight's broadcast, so we've just about got time for one more track before I introduce this evening's special guest. And so, this is David Bowie with Heroes.
I wish you could swim like the dolphins, like dolphins can swim. Though nothing will keep us together, we can be there forever and ever. I will be king, and you will be queen. Though nothing will drive them away, we can be heroes just for one day. We can be us just for one day.
Well, that couldn't have been a better introduction to our guest. Unfortunately, we couldn't get him to the studio this evening, but I do believe that we have him on the line. Here he is, folks, Mr. David Bowie himself. Hello, David. Can you hear me, David? Can you hear me, David?
Ich höre dich laut und deutlich, Geoff.
Ah, great. Wow, thank you so much for joining us on the line.
Ich musste jemanden anrufen, also habe ich dich ausgewählt.
Okay. So our listeners should know that you're on your way to us in the studio. Clearly that's going to take a while. How far away are you, David?
Ich habe jetzt die Marke von 100.000 Meilen überschritten. Es ist ziemlich still. Ich denke, mein Raumschiff weiß, welchen Weg es gehen soll.
Okay, well, I hope you've got a good book with you.
Ich sitze nur in meiner Blechdose, hoch über der Welt.
Oh, you're breaking up a bit, David. Is there anything you'd like to tell our listeners before you go? Can you hear me, David? Can you hear me, David? Well, I'm afraid it looks like we've lost contact there. But yes, you heard it. David Bowie is on his way to the studio and will hopefully be joining us for the next broadcast. Very exciting. Okay, folks, if you're out there, and I certainly hope you are, that's all we've got time for tonight. So I'll just leave you with this. The moon is a friend for the lonesome to talk to. This is Jeffrey, signing off.
This bitter earth, what a fruit it bears. This bitter earth